Brief Interviews with Hideous Men. Interview 20, December 1996, New Haven, Connecticut. And yet I did not fall in love with her until she had related the story of the unbelievably horrifying incident in which she was brutally accosted and held captive and very nearly killed. Q. Let me explain. I'm aware of how it might sound, believe me. I can explain. In bed together, in response to some sort of prompt or association, she related an anecdote about hitchhiking and once being picked up by what turned out to be a psychotic serial sex offender who then drove her to a secluded area and raped her and would almost surely have murdered her had she not been able to think effectively on her feet under enormous fear and stress. Irregardless of whatever I might have thought of the quality and substance of the thinking that enabled her to induce him to let her live. Q. Neither would I. Who would now, in an era when psychotic serial killers have their own trading cards? I'm concerned in today's climate to steer clear of any suggestion of anyone, quote, asking for it. Let's not even go there. But rest assured that it gives one pause about the capacities of judgment involved, or at the very least the naivete. Q. Only that it was perhaps marginally less unbelievable in the context of her type, in that this was what one might call a, quote, granola cruncher, or post-hippie, new ager, what have you. In college, where one is first exposed to social taxonomies, we called them granola crunchers or simply crunchers, terms comprising the prototypical sandals, unrefined fibers, daffy arcana, emotional incontinence, flamboyantly long hair, extreme liberality on social issues, financial support from parents they revile, bare feet, obscure import religions, indifferent hygiene, a gooey and somewhat canned vocabulary, the whole predictable peace and love post-hippie diction that Q. A large outdoor concert-performance art community festival thing in a park downtown where it was a pickup, plain and simple. I will not try to represent it as anything nicer than that, or more faded. And I'm going to admit at the risk of appearing mercenary that her prototypical cruncher morphology was evident right at first sight, from clear on the other side of the bandstand, and dictated the terms of the approach and the tactics of the pickup itself and made the whole thing almost criminally easy. Half the women, it is a less uncommon typology among educated girls out here than one might think. You don't want to know what kind of festival or why the three of us were there, trust me. I'll just bite the political bullet and confess that I classified her as a strictly one-night objective, and that my interest in her was almost entirely due to the fact that she was extremely pretty, sexually attractive, sexy. She had a phenomenal body, even under the poncho. It was her body that attracted me. Her face was a bit strange. Not homely, but eccentric. Tad's assessment was that she looked like a really sexy duck. Nevertheless, nolo to the charge that I spotted her on the blanket at the concert and sauntered carnivorously over with an overtly one-night objective. And, having had some prior dealings with the cruncher genus prior to this, that the one-night proviso was due mostly to the grim unimaginability of having to talk to a New Age brigadier for more than one night. Whether or not you approve, I think we can assume you understand. Q. That essential, at center life is just a cute pet bunny fluffiness about them that makes it so exceedingly hard to take them seriously or not to end up feeling as if you're exploiting them in some way. Q. Fluffiness or daffiness or intellectual flaccidity or a somehow smug-seeming naivete. Choose whichever offends you least. And yes, and don't worry, I'm aware of how all this sounds and can well imagine the judgments you're forming from the way I'm characterizing what drew me to her. But if I'm to explain this to you as requested, then I have no choice but to be brutally candid rather than observing the pseudo-sensitive niceties of euphemism about the way a reasonably experienced, educated man is going to view an extraordinarily good-looking girl whose life philosophy is fluffy and unconsidered and, when one comes right down to it, kind of contemptible. I'm going to pay you the compliment of not pretending to worry whether you understand what I'm referring to about the difficulty of not feeling impatience and even contempt. The blithe hypocrisy, the blatant self-contradiction, the way you know from the outset that there will be the requisite enthusiasms for the rainforest and spotted owl, creative meditation, feel-good psychology, Macrobiosis, rabid distrust of what they consider authority without evidently once stopping to consider the rigid authoritarianism implicit in the rigid uniformity of their own quote-unquote nonconformist uniform, vocabulary, attitudes. As someone who worked himself through both college and 2 years now of postgraduate school, I have to confess to an almost blanket, these rich kids in torn jeans whose way of protesting apartheid was to boycott South African pot. Silverglade called them the inward bound. The smug naivete, the condescension and the quote compassion they feel for those quote unquote trapped or imprisoned in orthodox American lifestyle choices, so on and so forth. The fact that the inward bound never consider that it's the probity and thrift of to occur to them that they themselves have themselves become the distillate of everything about the culture they deride and define themselves as opposing, the narcissism, the materialism and complacency and unexamined conformity, nor the irony that the blithe teleology of this quote impending new age is exactly the same cultural permission slip that Manifest Destiny was, or the Reich, or the dialectic of the proletariat, or the Cultural Revolution, all the same. And it never even occurs to them their certainty that they are different is what makes them the same. Q. You would be surprised. Q. All right, and the near contempt here specifically in the way you can saunter casually over and bend down next to her blanket to initiate conversation and idly play with the blanket's fringe and easily create the sense of affinity and connection that will allow you to pick her up and somehow almost resent that it's so goddamn easy to make the conversation flow toward a sense of connection. How exploitative you feel when it is so easy to get this type to regard you as a kindred soul. You almost know what's going to be said next without her having even to open her pretty mouth. Tad said she was like some kind of smooth, blank, perfect piece of pseudo-art you want to buy so you can take it home and smear Q. No, not at all, because I am trying to explain that the typology here dictated a tactic of what appeared to be a blend of embarrassed confession and brutal candor. The moment enough of a mood of conversational intimacy had been established to make a, quote, confession seem even remotely plausible, I deployed a sensitive, pained expression and, quote, confessed that I'd in fact not just been passing her blanket and had, even though we didn't know one another, felt a mysterious but overwhelming urge just to lean down and say, hi, but know something about her that made it impossible to deploy anything less than total honesty, now forced me to confess that I had in fact deliberately approached her blanket and initiated conversation because I had seen her from across the bandstand and had felt some mysterious but overwhelmingly sensual energy seeming to emanate from her very being, and had been helplessly drawn to it, and had leaned down and introduced myself and started a conversation with her because I wanted to connect and make mutually nurturing and exquisite love with her, and had been ashamed of admitting this natural desire, and so had fibbed at first in explaining my approach of her, though now some mysterious gentleness and generosity of soul I could intuit about her was now allowing me to feel serene enough to confess that I had, formerly, fibbed. Note the rhetorically specific blend of childish diction like hi and fib with flaccid abstractions like nurture and energy and serene. This is the lingua franca of the inward bound. I actually truly did like her, I found, as an individual. She had an amused expression during the whole conversation that made it hard not to smile in return, and an involuntary need to smile is one of the best feelings available, no? A refill? It's refill time, yes?